The church bells of Silverado Creek rang hollow that October morning in 1878, each peal echoing across the dusty main street like a mockery of what should have been. Wade Johnson stood at the altar in his best Sunday suit, the one he'd bought special from the general store, still smelling faintly of camphor and new wool. His calloused hands fidgeted with the silver pocket watch his father had left him, the one that now showed 11 minutes past the hour. 11 minutes late? Margaret was never late. The small wooden church was packed with near every soul in town, ranchers in their cleanest shirts, wives in their finest bonnets, children scrubbed pink and warned to stay quiet. Old Mrs. Henderson sat in the front pew, her knowing eyes full of the pity Wade couldn't bear to see. Behind her, the Murphy brothers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their spurs jangling softly against the floorboards. Reverend Porter cleared his throat for the third time. "Perhaps we should—" "She'll be here," Wade said, his voice steady as granite, though his jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. "Margaret wouldn't— She'll be here." But even as the words left his mouth, Wade knew, had known. Maybe since the moment he'd woken that morning to find her letter slipped under his door at the boarding house. He'd left it unread, telling himself it was just wedding day nerves. Just Margaret being Margaret. The envelope now burned like a coal in his breast pocket. The murmuring started soft, like wind through prairie grass. Wade could feel every eye in that church on him, some sympathetic, some curious, a few almost gleeful at the spectacle. Tom Rodriguez, who'd lost out on the bidding for the Henderson cattle last spring, was actually smiling behind his mustache. "Son," Reverend Porter said gently, laying a weathered hand on Wade's shoulder. "I think perhaps—" The church door creaked open. Every head turned. Wade's heart leaped like a spooked Mustang, hope flooding through him so fast it made him dizzy. But it was only little Jimmy Turner, peering in with wide eyes before his mother yanked him back outside. The silence that followed was suffocating. Wade reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter. His name was written across the front in Margaret's careful script, the same hand that had penned him sweet words for 6 months of courtship, the same hand that had accepted his ring just 2 months ago under the big oak tree by Miller's Pond. The paper crinkled as he unfolded it, each sound magnified in the stillness of the church. Asterisk, Dear Wade. Asterisk. By the time you read this, I'll be on the morning stage to San Francisco. I'm sorry. I thought I could do this. Thought I could be a rancher's wife. But I can't. I wasn't made for this life, the dust, the isolation, the endless work. I wasn't made for Silverado Creek. Asterisk, I know you'll hate me. And you have every right. You're a good man. Wade Johnson. The best. You deserve someone who can love this life the way you do. Someone who sees beauty in sunrise over the mesa instead of just another day of washing and mending and waiting. Don't come after me. Let me go. Find someone who can give you what I can't. Asterisk, Margaret, asterisk. P. I left the ring on your porch. It belongs here more than I ever did. Wade's hand trembled slightly as he folded the letter back up. The church was so quiet he could hear the wind rattling the loose board on the north wall, the one he'd promised Reverend Porter he'd fix last Sunday. "Well," Wade said, his voice carrying that peculiar calmness that comes when the worst has already happened. "Seems there won't be a wedding today after all." He turned to face the congregation, his weathered face composed, his gray eyes steady. At 28, Wade had the look of a man who'd already lived hard sun-lined face, broad shoulders built by years of working cattle, hands scarred from rope burns and barbed wire. He'd survived drought, cattle thieves, and a Comanche raid that had nearly wiped out his first herd. He'd survived this too. "I apologize for wasting your Sunday morning. Folks, Reverend, I'll still make that donation to the church roof fund." He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Reckon the good Lord has other plans?" The crowd stirred uneasily. Some of the women were dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Bill Martinez stood up like he wanted to say something, then sat back down at his wife's sharp tug. Wade walked down the aisle with measured steps, his boots echoing on the pine boards. He kept his eyes straight ahead, not meeting anyone's gaze, not acknowledging the whispers that followed in his wake. The October sun hit him like a slap when he pushed through the church doors. His horse, Dust Devil, waited at the hitching post, tail swishing at flies. Wade had brushed him until his bay coat shone, had even braided his mane for the occasion. The horse nickered softly as Wade approached, and he found his first real smile of the day. "Just you and me again, old boy," Wade murmured, untying the reins. "Wade, wait." He turned to find his foreman, Jake Sullivan, hurrying down the church steps. Jake was a grizzled man in his 50s who'd been riding with Wade since he'd bought his first 100 acres 5 years back. Behind him came several others, the Murphy brothers, Bill Martinez, even Tom Rodriguez looking somewhat abashed. "We're heading to your place," Jake announced. "Got fence to mend on the north pasture, don't we, boys?" "That we do," Patrick Murphy agreed quickly. "Been meaning to get to that all week. And I noticed your barn could use some work on the roof," Bill added. Wade looked at the group of men, his throat suddenly tight. "That's not necessary." "Like hell it ain't." Jake interrupted. "You helped every man here at one time or another. Time we returned the favor." Tom Rodriguez stepped forward, pulling a flask from his vest. "Besides, I got some whiskey here that's too good to drink alone. Shame to waste it." Wade wanted to refuse, wanted to ride off alone to nurse his wounds in private like a sensible wounded animal. But looking at these men, his neighbors, his friends, he found he couldn't. "All right," he said quietly. "All right, then." The ride back to Wade's ranch was made in companionable silence. The kind men understand when words would only make things worse. The Double J spread named for Wade's father. Josiah Johnson sat pretty in a valley 5 miles outside town, sheltered by ridges on 3 sides and opening to good grazing land on the 4th. Wade had built it up from nothing, starting with a half-dugout shelter and a handful of longhorns bought on credit. And now it boasted a proper house with 4 rooms and real glass windows, a solid barn, and 300 head of cattle bearing his brand. Everything a man needed to start a family. Everything he'd built with Margaret in mind. The house looked different when they rode up. Smaller, somehow, emptier, like it knew what had almost been and mourned the loss. "Jake, you and the boys really don't need to—" "Wade Johnson, you shut your mouth and let us help," Jake said firmly. "Mary's sending over supper later, and I don't want to hear a word about it." The men dispersed with practiced efficiency. The Murphys headed for the north pasture with wire and posts from the barn. Bill and a few others climbed up to inspect the barn roof. Jake stayed with Wade, the 2 of them sitting on the porch steps while Tom's whiskey made the rounds. "She seemed like a nice girl," Jake said after a while. "She was," Wade agreed. "Is just not meant for this life, I reckon." "Her loss." Wade took a long pull from the flask. The whiskey burned, but it was a good burn, a distraction from the deeper ache. Maybe, or maybe she was smart. This life ain't easy. "No," Jake agreed. "But it's a good life for those made for it." They sat in silence, watching the others work. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. "You know what the worst part is?" Wade said suddenly. Jake waited. "I saw it coming, these past weeks. The way she'd look out at the horizon like it was a prison wall. The way she'd flinch when the cattle bellowed at dawn. The way she'd hold my hand like she was already saying goodbye." Wade rubbed his face with one hand. I thought if I loved her enough, it would be enough." "Sometimes love ain't enough," Jake said quietly. "Sometimes people just don't fit, no matter how much you want them to." By afternoon, the fence was mended, the barn roof patched, and even the rickety gate on the chicken coop had been fixed. The women started arriving around supper time, Mary Sullivan with a pot of stew. Murphy with fresh bread, others with pies and preserves and enough food to feed Wade for a week. They didn't stay long, these good women of Silverado Creek, just long enough to fill his kitchen with food and his table with wildflowers someone had thought to pick. Long enough for Mary Sullivan to squeeze his hand and whisper, "This too shall pass, Wade." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Wade found himself alone again. He stood on his porch, looking out over the land he'd fought so hard to claim. The evening breeze carried the scent of sage and the distant lowing of cattle settling for the night. He pulled Margaret's letter from his pocket one more time, then walked to the stove and fed it to the flames. The paper curled and blackened, her words turning to ash and smoke. Tomorrow he'd ride out to check the herd. He'd fix that loose board at the church. He'd go on, because that's what you did out here. You endured. You survived. You built something from nothing and protected it with everything you had. But tonight, Wade Johnson allowed himself to grieve for what might have been. For the woman who'd stood in this very spot and seen only emptiness where he saw home. For the dreams that had dissolved like morning mist. For the future that had been yanked away as surely as a calf from a branding fire. The stars came out one by one, diamonds scattered across black velvet. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, lonely and defiant. Wade listened to it for a long moment, understanding the sentiment completely. Then he went inside, closed the door on the day that should have been his wedding, and began the long process of learning to be alone again. The winter of 1878 came early to Silverado Creek, riding in on the back of a blue norther that froze the water troughs solid and left ice crystals hanging from the cattle's whiskers. Wade Johnson stood at his barn door, watching the snow fall thick and silent across his land, transforming the familiar landscape into something alien and unforgiving. 3 months. 3 months since Margaret had left him standing at the altar like a fool. The town had moved on to fresher gossip, the widow Hutchins taking up with that traveling salesman, the Peterson boy running off to join the railroad crews. But Wade remained frozen in that October morning, as surely as the ground beneath his boots. "Boss, we're gonna lose some cattle if this keeps up," Jake Sullivan said, materializing from the swirling white like a specter. Ice clung to his mustache, and his face was red raw from the wind. "Already found 2 yearlings frozen in the South Gully." Wade nodded, his mind automatically calculating the loss. Every dead animal was money he couldn't afford to lose. Dreams of expansion dying in the snow. "Move the herd to the sheltered valley. Use the hay we've been saving." "All of it." "What choice do we have?" Jake studied him with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Wade had lost weight these past months, his clothes hanging looser on his frame. He ate when Jake or one of the other hands reminded him to, slept when exhaustion finally claimed him, and worked every other waking moment like a man possessed. "You know, Mary's been asking after you," Jake said carefully. "Says you haven't been to Sunday dinner in over a month." "Been busy. Too busy to eat, too busy to see folks." Wade turned away, heading into the barn where the horses stamped and blew in their stalls. The familiar smells of hay and leather and animal warmth should have been comforting, but comfort was something he'd learned to live without. "I pay you to worry about the cattle, Jake, not about me." "Well, someone needs to," Jake muttered, but he let it drop. The work was brutal that winter. Every day brought fresh challenges, frozen water lines that needed breaking, sick cattle requiring doctoring, fences collapsed under the weight of snow. Wade threw himself into each task with a single-minded determination, as if he could exhaust himself enough to stop thinking, stop remembering. He'd taken to sleeping in the barn more often than the house. The house, with its empty rooms and 2 quiet corners, felt like a monument to his foolishness. He'd built those 4 rooms with his own hands, imaging them filled with laughter and children and a woman's warm presence. Now they echoed with nothing but wind and regret. On the worst nights, when the blizzards howled like all the demons of hell, Wade would find himself staring at the empty peg where Margaret's bonnet should have hung, the bare spot on the shelf where her Bible should have rested. He'd packed away the few things she'd left: a handkerchief, a broken comb, a book of poetry. But their absence was somehow louder than their presence had ever been. The other ranchers stopped by when they could, bringing news from town and staying for coffee that Wade brewed too strong and served too hot. They talked about cattle prices and the weather, the new territorial governor and the rumors of silver strikes to the north. They didn't talk about Margaret or marriage or the way Wade's smile had become something he wore like an ill-fitting coat. Heard there's a barn dance at the Morrison place come Saturday. Bill Martinez mentioned one gray afternoon, warming his hands around a tin cup. Their daughter Amy's been asking if you'll attend. Too much work here, Wade said automatically. Always is, Bill agreed. Still, a man can't work all the time. But Wade could, and did. When the sun rose, he was already in the saddle, checking the herd. When it set, he was still working mending tack, fixing equipment, planning for spring. His hands grew harder, his face more weathered, his eyes emptier. The young cowhands he employed started avoiding him, where once he'd been known for his easy manner and fair dealing. Now he was sharp-tongued and demanding, finding fault where none existed, pushing men and animals alike to their limits. "You're turning into a real son of a gun," Jake told him bluntly one evening after Wade had sent young Tommy Baxter home in tears over a minor mistake with the feed. "That boy looks up to you, and you treated him like dirt." Wade stood at the barn door, watching Tommy's retreating figure disappear into the dusk. Shame curdled in his stomach, but he pushed it down with all the other feelings he didn't want to examine. "Maybe it's better if he doesn't," Wade said quietly. "Looking up to me didn't do Margaret any good. Margaret made her choice." Jake said, "Don't punish the rest of us for it." But Wade couldn't seem to stop. It was easier to be hard, easier to be distant. If you didn't let people close, they couldn't leave. If you didn't hope, you couldn't be disappointed. If you didn't love, the thought always stopped there, hitting a wall he'd built brick by brick in the months since October. Christmas came and went with little fanfare. Jake and Mary Sullivan tried to convince him to join their family celebration, but Wade begged off, claiming a sick horse needed tending. He spent the day alone, sharing his meager supper with Dust Devil and pretending the ache in his chest was just from the cold. On New Year's Eve, he found himself in town for supplies, hoping to avoid the celebrations at the saloon, but Homer Green, the shopkeeper, was in a talkative mood. "Shame about the Baxter place," Homer said, measuring out flour. "Banks foreclosing come spring if they can't make the payment." Wade paused in examining a new bridle. The Baxters were good people. John Baxter had helped Wade build his first corral, and his wife had nursed Wade through a bout of fever his second winter here. "How much do they need?" Homer named a figure that made Wade wince. It was substantial, but not impossible. Not if he sold some of his prize breeding stock. "Shame," Homer continued, not noticing Wade's distraction. "But the bank's got new rules now. Won't extend credit to unmarried men or widowers. Say family men are better risks." He chuckled. "Guess they figure a wife and children make a man more likely to stick around and pay his debts." Wade left with his supplies, but Homer's words echoed in his mind. The Baxters weren't the only ones struggling. Half the small ranchers in the territory were one bad season away from ruin, and now the banks were making it harder for men like him, men alone, to get the credit they needed to survive. That night, he sat at his kitchen table with his account book spread before him. The numbers were clear enough. He was doing better than most, his careful management and brutal work schedule keeping him afloat. But expansion would require credit, and credit apparently required a wife. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he'd sworn off women and marriage, content to grow old alone with his cattle and his bitterness. And now the very thing he'd rejected might be the key to saving not just his ranch, but others as well. February brought a brief thaw, followed by the worst blizzard anyone could remember. Wade lost a dozen cattle despite his best efforts, finding them frozen, standing up like macabre statues in the far pasture. The loss hit him hard, not just financially, But somewhere deeper, he'd failed them, these dumb beasts who depended on him for protection. Standing among the frozen carcasses, snow swirling around him like a shroud, Wade felt something crack inside him. Not break, not shatter, just crack like ice beginning to thin under spring sun. "I can't do this alone," he said to the empty sky. The words were swallowed by the wind, but speaking them aloud made them real. That night, he wrote a letter to his cousin in Chicago, asking about the possibility of arranged marriages. He wrote another to a matrimonial agency he'd heard about in San Francisco. He wrote with the same methodical precision he brought to every task, laying out his assets and requirements like a business proposal. Because that's what it would be, a business arrangement. A practical solution to a practical problem. No romance, no poetry, no standing at altars with his heart in his throat. Just a contract between two people who needed what the other could provide. He didn't need love. He'd tried that, and look where it had gotten him. But he needed a partner, someone to help run the ranch, to satisfy the bank's requirements, to fill the empty spaces in his house, if not in his heart. As he sealed the letters, Wade caught his reflection in the dark window glass. The man staring back at him looked older than his 28 years. Harder, colder. The kind of man who proposed marriage in a letter like a business transaction. The kind of man who'd given up on love and settled for survival. Outside, the wind howled its lonely song across the frozen plains. Wade listened to it as he prepared for bed in the empty house, wondering if spring would bring more than just a thaw, wondering if his frozen heart was beyond saving, or if somewhere out there was a woman desperate enough or practical enough to accept what little he had left to offer. He didn't pray, hadn't since October, but as he lay in his cold bed listening to the house creak and settle around him, Wade found himself hoping, not for love. He was done with that. But for something, for someone, for a chance to build something lasting in this hard land, even if it was built on nothing more than mutual need and stubborn determination. The winter had turned his heart to stone, but even stone could be shaped with the right tools and enough patience. And if there was one thing Wade Johnson had learned in these long, bitter months, it was patience. Spring came reluctantly to Silverado Creek, fighting winter for every inch of ground. By late March, the snow had finally retreated to the high places, leaving behind a landscape of mud and emerging grass. Wade Johnson stood in the bank manager's office, hat in hand, watching Edgar Whitman shuffle through papers with theatrical slowness. "I'm afraid the board's decision is final, Mr. Johnson," Whitman said, not quite meeting Wade's eyes. The banker was a soft man who'd never worked a day under the sun, his hands pale and uncalloused. "The new lending policies require married men for loans of this magnitude. It's nothing personal, you understand. Simply business." "I've never missed a payment," Wade said evenly. 5 years I've been banking here, and we appreciate that. However," Whitman spread his hands helplessly, "the territories are changing. We need stability. Family men provide that stability." Wade left the bank with measured steps, though anger simmered beneath his calm exterior. The land he'd had his eye on, 500 acres of prime grazing adjacent to his property, would double his operation. The owner, old Sam Higgins, was retiring back east and had given Wade first chance at it, but without the bank's loan. On the boardwalk outside, he nearly collided with Mrs. Morrison, the mayor's wife and Silverado Creek's unofficial matchmaker. Mr. Johnson, how fortunate," she exclaimed, clutching his arm with surprising strength for such a delicate-looking woman. "I've been meaning to speak with you. My niece from St. Louis is visiting next month. Lovely girl, very accomplished." "I appreciate the thought, Mrs. Morrison, but I'm not." "Nonsense. A man your age needs a wife. Why, it's positively unnatural. You rattling around in that house alone." Her eyes sharpened. "Besides, I heard about the bank's new policies. Shameful, if you ask me. But there it is." Wade extracted himself as politely as possible, but her words followed him home. By evening, 3 more well-meaning matrons had cornered him with suggestions of eligible daughters, nieces, and cousins. The whole town, it seemed, had decided his marital status was their business. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, staring at the letter that had arrived that morning. The matrimonial agency in San Francisco had responded with surprising speed. Asterisk, Dear Mr. Johnson. Asterisk. We have several ladies in our registry who might suit your requirements. However, we notice you specified no particular preferences regarding age, appearance, or temperament only, that the lady be willing to work and not given to foolish notions. Asterisk. Asterisk. May we suggest that a more detailed listing of your expectations might yield better results? We have enclosed our standard questionnaire. Wade picked up the questionnaire, scanning the detailed categories. Preferred age, hair color, musical accomplishments, church denomination. The questions seemed to reduce a wife to a catalog entry, like ordering farm equipment from a Chicago supplier. He was about to crumple it up when another letter caught his eye, this one from his cousin Benjamin in Chicago. Asterisk Wade. Asterisk. Asterisk. Your letter surprised me, but I understand your predicament. As it happens, I may know of someone. There's a woman here, a widow named Mrs. Lily Fairchild. She's fallen on hard times. Her husband died last year, leaving considerable debts. She has no family to speak of and is currently working in a factory under difficult conditions. She's not what you'd call beautiful, and at 32, she's past the usual marrying age. But I've observed her at church, and she seems steady, hardworking, and sensible. Most importantly, she needs a new situation rather desperately. The factory work is killing her slowly, 12 hours a day in terrible conditions. I've made discreet inquiries, and she might be amenable to an arrangement such as you describe. She's under no illusions about romance at her age and in her circumstances. Shall I approach her on your behalf? Asterisk. Asterisk, Benjamin Asterisk. Wade read the letter twice. A widow. That meant she'd known loss too. Understood that sometimes life didn't follow the pretty patterns folks expected. A woman who worked in a factory would know about hard labor. Wouldn't come expecting a life of leisure. Before he could think better of it, he pulled out paper and pen. Asterisk, Benjamin Asterisk. Asterisk, make the approach. Be clear about the terms. This is a business arrangement. She'll have a good home, her own room, and respect. In return, I need a helpmate for the ranch and someone to satisfy the bank's requirements. No pretense of affection is required or desired. Asterisk, if she's interested, send her on the next stage. I'll cover all travel expenses. Asterisk Wade, asterisk. He sealed the letter before doubt could creep in. Then wrote another to the Higgins about the land, requesting a 60-day option to arrange financing. It was a risk if this arrangement fell through. He'd lose the deposit. But sometimes a man had to gamble on more than just cattle prices. 2 weeks later, Jake found him repairing fence posts in the north pasture. Boss, you got another letter from Chicago. Wade's hands stilled on the wire. He'd been half expecting Benjamin to write back, saying the woman had laughed at the very idea. He wiped his hands on his pants and took the letter. Asterisk Wade, asterisk. Asterisk, Mrs. Fairchild has agreed to your proposal. She asks for no courtship or romantic gestures, only the assurance of fair treatment and the understanding that this is a partnership of mutual benefit. She can be on the stage by month's end if you send word. Asterisk, I must tell you, cousin, she seemed relieved rather than offended by your straightforward approach. I believe you may find in her a practical partner for your practical proposal. Asterisk, Benjamin asterisk. P.S. She asks if she might bring her few belongings, including her late husband's books. She says she understands if you prefer she come with nothing. Wade read the postscript again. Something about that simple request asking permission to bring books touched him in a way he didn't expect. He wrote back immediately, telling her to bring whatever she wished, and included money for travel expenses plus extra for anything she might need for the journey. The next weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Wade attacked the house like it was an enemy fortification, scrubbing years of bachelor neglect from every surface. He moved his belongings from the largest bedroom, setting it up for her use. He repaired the stove, fixed the loose floorboards, even planted flowers by the porch, practical marigolds that would keep insects away. "Place looks right nice," Jake observed, watching Wade hang new curtains Mary Sullivan had helped him select. "Almost like a real home." "It needs to look respectable," Wade said stiffly. "This is a business arrangement. I won't have her thinking I'm some kind of barbarian." Jake's expression was knowing. "Sure, boss, all business." Word spread through Silverado Creek like wildfire. Wade Johnson had sent for a mail-order bride. The gossip mill churned with speculation. Some said she must be desperate. Others wondered what was wrong with her that she'd agree to such an arrangement. A few of the more romantic souls hoped it might turn into a love match, while the cynics placed bets on how long it would last. Wade ignored them all, focusing on work and trying not to think about the enormity of what he'd done. He was binding himself to a complete stranger, a woman he'd never met, whose voice he'd never heard, all because a bank had decided unmarried men were poor risks. The night before she was due to arrive, Wade couldn't sleep. He stood on his porch, looking out at the land he'd fought so hard to build. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, a stranger would walk into his life and his home, bound to him by necessity rather than affection. He thought about Margaret, allowed himself that pain for just a moment. She'd stood on this same porch and seen a prison. What would Lily Fairchild see? Would she understand that this arrangement was all he had left to offer? That the man who'd once stood at an altar full of hope had become someone who proposed marriage in a business letter? Inside, the house waited clean, orderly, empty of warmth despite the flowers and curtains, 2 bedrooms at opposite ends of the hall, 2 lives that would share a roof but nothing more. It wasn't what he'd dreamed of when he'd built this place, but dreams were luxury he could no longer afford. He'd promised her fair treatment and respect. He'd give her that and more safety, security, a home of her own. In return, she'd give him respectability in the eyes of the bank and help with the endless work of the ranch. It was a fair trade, a sensible arrangement. So why did the very sensibility of it make him feel hollow as a dried gourd? The stars offered no answers, and eventually Wade went inside. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. Tomorrow, Lily Fairchild would step off that stage, and their practical partnership would begin. As he lay in bed, Wade allowed himself one last moment of wondering. What kind of woman agreed to marry a stranger? What kind of courage or desperation did it take to leave everything behind for an unknown future? He'd find out soon enough, and perhaps in her own courage or desperation, he'd find a kindred spirit. Not love, he was done with that, but understanding. 2 people who'd learned that sometimes survival meant accepting less than you'd hoped for. It wasn't much, but it was something, and after the winter he'd endured, something was better than nothing at all. The church stood empty save for Wade, Reverend Porter, and Jake Sullivan as witness. No flowers adorned the altar. No music filled the air. The same church where Wade had been humiliated 6 months ago now waited in simple, unadorned silence for a different kind of ceremony. Wade checked his pocket watch. The stage was late. He wore his good suit again, though this time without the hopeful rose in his lapel or the nervous energy of a man expecting happiness. His hands were steady, his expression calm. This was business. Nothing more. "She'll come," Jake said quietly from the front pew. "Woman who travels all the way from Chicago isn't going to turn back now." Wade nodded, though part of him almost wished she would. It would be simpler, in a way, to remain alone than to navigate the complicated arrangement he'd set in motion. The church door creaked open. Afternoon light spilled in, backlighting a feminine silhouette. Wade's chest tightened involuntarily, muscle memory from the last time he'd stood here waiting. But this was different. Everything about this was different. Lily Fairchild stepped into the church, and Wade's first thought was that Benjamin had been honest in his assessment. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense, her face was too strong for that, with sharp cheekbones and a determined jaw. Her brown hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her traveling dress was plain black wool, worn but meticulously mended. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd learned to survive on very little. But it was her eyes that caught him, gray-green, like sage after rain. They met his with a directness that spoke of someone who'd given up pretense. There was no coyness there, no romantic flutter, just steady assessment. She walked down the aisle with measured steps, carrying a small carpet bag. No hesitation, no trembling. When she reached him, she extended her hand like a man would. "Mr. Johnson, I'm Lily Fairchild." Her voice was lower than he'd expected, with a slight rasp that suggested too many hours breathing factory air. Her handshake was firm, her palm calloused, working hands, like his own. "Ma'am," Wade managed. "Thank you for coming." A slight smile touched her lips, not amused, exactly, but acknowledging the strangeness of thanking someone for coming to their own wedding. "Shall we proceed?" she asked, practical as a grocery list. "I assume you have work to return to." Reverend Porter cleared his throat, looking between them with barely concealed concern. "Perhaps you'd like a few moments to speak privately first. Get acquainted." "That won't be necessary," Lily said before Wade could respond. "Mr. Johnson and I understand the nature of our arrangement. Best to complete the formalities." Wade found himself oddly grateful for her businesslike manner. It made everything simpler, cleaner. No need to pretend this was something it wasn't. The ceremony was brief. Reverend Porter, clearly uncomfortable with the lack of romance, tried to inject some warmth into the proceedings, but Lily's steady gaze and Wade's stoic expression defeated him. They spoke their vows like people signing a contract which, Wade supposed, they were. "To have and to hold," Wade said, the words ashes in his mouth as he remembered saying them with joy just months before. "For better or worse," Lily responded, her tone suggesting she'd already seen the worst and wasn't expecting much better. When Reverend Porter reached the part about kissing the bride, an awkward silence fell. Lily looked at Wade with those direct eyes. "I believe we can dispense with that, Reverend," she said calmly. "Mr. Johnson and I have an understanding." Wade felt an unexpected flash of something, not disappointment, surely, relief, he told himself. Relief that she understood the boundaries. Papers signed, fees paid. They emerged from the church as husband and wife-in-law, if nothing else. The few townspeople on the street stopped to stare. Mrs. Morrison actually dropped her parcels. "Is that your wagon?" Lily asked, nodding toward Wade's buckboard. "Yes, ma'am." "Then we should load my things. I had them left at the depot." Her things turned out to be 2 small trunks and a crate of books. Wade loaded them while she stood aside, making no move to play the helpless female. When he offered his hand to help her up to the wagon seat, she took it with the same practical efficiency she'd shown throughout. The ride to the ranch was silent, except for the creak of wheels and the steady clop of hooves. Wade found himself stealing glances at her profile. In the late afternoon light, he could see fine lines around her eyes, a faint scar on her chin. She'd lived. This woman survived things that left marks. "The house has 4 rooms," he said finally, feeling the need to fill the silence. "I've prepared the large bedroom for you. It faces east, good morning light." "That's generous," she said, her tone neutral. "Where will you sleep?" "The small room at the other end used to be my office, but it'll do fine." She nodded, asking no further questions. They might have been discussing boarding house arrangements. As they crested the hill that revealed the Double J spread, Wade watched her face carefully. This was the moment Margaret had begun to look trapped. But Lily's expression didn't change as she took in the house, the barn, the rolling grassland stretching to the mountains. It's well situated, she observed. Good protection from the north wind, adequate water. Spring-fed creek that runs year-round, Wade confirmed, surprised by her practical assessment. Never gone dry, even in drought years. And the house you built it? Yes, ma'am, 5 years ago. She studied the structure with those sharp eyes. Sound construction, though I noticed the kitchen garden's gone to seed. Haven't had time for such things, Wade admitted. I'll see to it, she said simply. A good garden saves money on provisions. When they pulled up to the house, she climbed down before he could offer assistance. While he unloaded her trunks, she stood on the porch, surveying her new domain with the same practical assessment she'd given everything else. Inside, Wade gave her a brief tour. She listened without comment as he explained the water pump, the temperamental stove, the root cellar. When he showed her to her room, she paused in the doorway. This is more than adequate. Mr. Johnson, thank you. Wade, he said awkwardly. Seems foolish to be formal, given the circumstances. Wade, then, she tested the name carefully. And you may call me Lily. An uncomfortable pause stretched between them. In a normal marriage, this would be the moment for... But this wasn't a normal marriage. I'll let you settle in, Wade said. Supper's usually at 6. Nothing fancy, I've been managing my own cooking. I'll take over the cooking, Lily said. It's only practical. What time do you prefer breakfast? First light, but you don't need to... Mr. Johnson Wade, she corrected herself. We have an arrangement. I intend to uphold my end. I'm not a decorative woman, nor do I pretend to be. But I can cook, clean, keep house, and help with ranch work as needed. That's what you require, isn't it? Yes, Wade said, though something in her matter-of-fact catalog of skills made him uncomfortable. That's what I require. She nodded, already turning to unpack. Then we understand each other. I'll have supper ready at 6. Dismissed. Wade retreated to the barn where Jake was finishing the evening chores. His foreman looked up expectantly. Well, it's done, Wade said shortly. What's she like? Wade considered the question. How to describe Lily Fairchild Johnson practical, he said finally. Sensible. No foolish notions. Sounds perfect for you, Jake said, though his tone suggested otherwise. It's what I need, Wade replied, picking up a pitchfork to help with the hay. What the ranch needs. At 6 sharp, he returned to find his kitchen transformed, not just clean but organized. Everything in logical places. The table was set with his mismatched plates arranged as nicely as possible. The smell of beef stew and fresh biscuits filled the air. Lily had changed from her traveling dress into a simple calico work dress, covered by an apron. Her hair was still severely pulled back, but a few strands had escaped in the heat from the stove, softening her appearance slightly. Sit, she said, placing a laden plate before him. The biscuits are a bit heavy. I'm still learning your stove's temperament. Wade took a bite. The biscuits were indeed heavy, but the stew was good, better than anything he'd managed in months. It's fine. Good. They ate in silence that wasn't quite comfortable but wasn't unbearable either. 2 strangers sharing a meal, bound by law and necessity. I'll need to know your routine, Lily said eventually. When you take meals, what washing needs done when... Any particular preferences? I'm not particular, Wade said. The ranch takes most of my time. As long as there's food and clean clothes, I'm content. She nodded, making mental notes. And the account books, I noticed ledgers on the shelf. I manage those myself. I have a good hand with figures. If you need help, kept books for my late husband. The first hesitation he'd heard from her. Maybe later, Wade said, not ready to share that much of his business yet. For now, the house and kitchen garden will be plenty. As you wish. After supper, She efficiently cleared the table and washed up. Declining his offer to help, Wade found himself at loose ends in his own house. Usually, he'd sit at the table with his ledgers or collapse straight into bed. But with her moving efficiently around his kitchen, neither seemed appropriate. "I'll be in the barn," he said finally. "Need to check on a lame horse." She looked up from drying a plate. "What time do you usually retire?" 9, thereabouts. "I'll have the lamps turned down by then. Good night, Wade." "Good night, Lily." Her name felt strange on his tongue. Wrong somehow, like clothes that didn't fit. But then everything about this felt wrong, or if not wrong, exactly. Then hollow, empty of everything marriage should contain. In the barn, Dust Devil nickered a greeting. Wade leaned against the horse's stall, trying to process the enormity of what he'd done. There was a stranger in his house, a woman who cooked his supper and would wash his clothes and share his name, but nothing else. "What have I done, boy?" he murmured to the horse. But he knew the answer. He'd done what was necessary, what was practical. He'd secured his future and possibly hers. Tomorrow, he'd ride into town and show the bank his marriage certificate. The loan would be approved. The land would be his. As for the woman in his house, well, they'd find a way to coexist. Like she'd said, they understood each other. No pretense, no false expectations. Just two people making the best of circumstances. It should have been comforting, this clarity. Instead, Wade felt something cold settle in his chest, like winter had taken up permanent residence despite the spring evening. When he finally returned to the house, it was dark except for a single lamp left burning low in the kitchen, a thoughtful touch he hadn't expected. He made his way to his small room at the far end of the hall. Passing her closed door, no light showed beneath it. His narrow bed felt different knowing she was in the house. The walls seemed thinner, the distance between their rooms both too great and not great enough. Wade lay awake long into the night, listening to the unfamiliar sound of another person's presence, the occasional creak of floorboards, the subtle shift in how the house breathed. Marriage, he thought bitterly. He'd stood at that altar today just as he had 6 months ago, but this time, no one had been left waiting. This time, everyone got what they'd bargained for. So why did he feel emptier than ever? The first weeks of their arrangement passed with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Lily rose before dawn to prepare breakfast. Wade ate in efficient silence, then disappeared to tend the ranch until dark. She kept the house spotless. Meals appeared at appointed times, and his clothes were washed and mended without his asking. They lived like polite strangers sharing a boarding house, careful not to intrude on each other's space. It was on a mild April morning that Wade first noticed the curtains. He'd been rushing through breakfast, mentally planning the day's work, when sunlight caught the kitchen window differently. New curtains hung there, nothing fancy, just simple blue-checked fabric, but they transformed the harsh morning light into something softer. "When did you—" he started, then stopped. Lily looked up from the stove. "Last week. The old ones were rotting. I used fabric from one of my old dresses." "You didn't need to cut up your clothes." "I have others." She turned back to the eggs. "Besides, curtains are more useful than a dress I'll never wear here." Wade studied her back, the efficient movements as she worked. She'd been here 3 weeks, and he knew little more about her than the day she'd arrived. She never complained, never asked for anything, never spoke of her life before, like she'd sprung into existence the moment she'd walked into that church. "The garden's coming along," he offered, attempting conversation. Through the window, he could see the neat rows she'd planted, the soil dark with morning water. "The growing season's short here. I've focused on hardy vegetables, potatoes, carrots, onions, practical things." Always practical. Wade wondered if she'd ever done anything impractical in her life. That evening, returning earlier than usual due to a lame horse, Wade found her sitting on the porch steps. It was the first time he'd seen her at rest, and something about the sight stopped him. She held a cup of coffee, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Her hair had loosened from its usual severe bun, and her face held an expression he couldn't name, not quite sadness, not quite peace. She startled when she noticed him, beginning to rise. "I'm sorry, supper's not—" "Sit," Wade said, surprising himself. "Supper can wait." She settled back uncertainly. Wade tied his horse and, after a moment's hesitation, sat on the steps a careful distance away. They watched the sunset in silence that felt different from their usual careful non-interaction. "It's beautiful here," Lily said finally. "Different from Chicago." "I imagined so. Have you always lived here?" "Came out from Missouri when I was 20. My father died. Left me a little money. Enough to start." She nodded, absorbing this rare personal information. "It must have been hard, building all this alone." Wade thought about those early years, the back-breaking work, the loneliness, the dreams that had kept him going. "Had help, good neighbors, and I had plans." The unspoken name hung between them. Margaret, the woman who should have been sitting here, should have been wearing his ring. Lily seemed to understand, turning her attention back to the sunset. "Plans change," she said quietly. That night after supper, instead of retreating immediately to the barn, Wade lingered at the table. Lily seemed surprised but adapted quickly, bringing her mending to work by lamplight. The silence between them felt less strained, broken by the occasional pop from the stove and the whisper of thread through fabric. "That's fine work," Wade observed, watching her tiny, precise stitches. "Factory work teaches precision," she replied, then caught herself as if she'd revealed too much. "How long were you there at the factory?" Her hands stilled briefly. 2 years, after Charles died. The first time she'd mentioned her husband by name. It was adequate employment. Wade knew about Chicago factories, had heard the stories. 12-hour days, dangerous conditions, wages that barely kept body and soul together. Must have been hard. "I survived." Her tone closed the subject, but not harshly. Just a fact, like stating the weather. As the weeks passed, small changes accumulated like dust motes becoming visible in afternoon light. Lily added touches to the house, a rag rug by the door, wildflowers in a mason jar on the table, herbs drying from the rafters. She never asked permission, just quietly improved things. Wade found he didn't mind. One morning, he discovered she'd repaired the wobbly kitchen chair he'd been meaning to fix for months. Another day, the squeaky hinge on the barn door suddenly worked smooth as silk. She moved through his life making small repairs, neither asking for thanks nor seeming to expect it. "Your wife's got a good head on her shoulders," Jake commented one day, after Lily had quietly pointed out an error in the feed order that would have cost them dear. "Noticed she's been helping with the books, too." Wade grunted non-committally. He'd started letting her help with the accounts after she'd caught a mistake in his arithmetic one evening. Her columns were neater than his, her math quicker. "Mary wants to invite you both for Sunday dinner." Jake continued. "Been a month now. Folks want to get to know her." The thought of presenting themselves as a married couple to others made Wade uncomfortable. Here at the ranch, they'd found a rhythm. In public, the charade would be harder to maintain. But Lily took the invitation in stride. That Sunday, she appeared in a green dress he hadn't seen before, her hair still severe but freshly washed. She looked not pretty exactly, but handsome in a strong way. "Will this do?" she asked, smoothing the skirt. "You look fine," Wade said, then felt he should add more. "The green suits you." A faint color touched her cheeks, the first real emotion he'd seen her display. "Thank you. Shall we go?" The dinner was less awkward than Wade feared. Lily handled Mary Sullivan's gentle probing with calm deflection, turning questions about herself into inquiries about recipes and gardening techniques. She spoke intelligently with the men about cattle prices and weather patterns. By the end of the meal, Wade could see she'd won Jake's approval and Mary's cautious friendship. "She's not what I expected," Mary confided to Wade while Lily helped clear dishes. "But I think she's exactly what you need." Riding home in the gathering dusk, Lily was quiet. Wade glanced at her profile, wondering what she was thinking. That went well. He offered, "They're good people. You're fortunate in your friends." "They're your friends too now." She looked at him with surprise. "I suppose they are. I hadn't thought. It's been a long time since I had friends." Something in her voice made Wade want to know more, but he'd learned not to push. Lily shared pieces of herself like a miser spending coins, each revelation precious for its rarity. That night, a late spring storm rolled in. Wade woke to thunder shaking the house and rain hammering the roof. His first thought was the garden Lily had worked so hard on those seedlings. He rose and padded to the kitchen, thinking to check if anything needed securing. He found Lily already there, fully dressed, watching the storm through the window. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head. "I was worried about the garden, but there's nothing to be done now." Lightning illuminated her face, and Wade saw something unguarded there, not the usual composed mask, but genuine worry. Over vegetables, over their vegetables. "It'll be fine," he said. "These storms blow through fast. Might even do the plants good." "I hope so. I'd hate to lose all that work." "We can replant if needed." She turned to him. "We?" Wade realized what he'd said. "Well, it's our garden, isn't it?" Something shifted in her expression. "Yes, I suppose it is." They stood together watching the storm, not touching but sharing the space in a way that felt almost companionable. When Lily shivered in the cool air, Wade fetched a blanket from the living room and draped it around her shoulders. She looked up at him, startled. "Thank you." "Can't have you catching cold," he said gruffly. When the storm passed and dawn broke gray and dripping, they ventured out together to survey the damage. The garden had survived mostly intact, though some of the young tomato plants were battered. "We can stake these up," Wade said, kneeling in the mud beside her. "They'll recover." Working side by side in the cool morning, salvaging what they could, Wade felt something he hadn't experienced in months, not happiness exactly, but an absence of loneliness. When Lily smiled at a particularly stubborn plant that had weathered the storm, he found himself almost smiling back. Later, washing the mud from their hands at the kitchen pump, their fingers accidentally touched, both pulled back as if burned. The moment of easy companionship shattered by the reminder of what they were and weren't to each other. "I should start breakfast," Lily said, not meeting his eyes. "I should check the stock," Wade replied simultaneously. They retreated to their separate spheres, the brief connection broken, but something had changed in those pre-dawn hours. A crack in the wall between them, tiny but real. That evening, Wade brought in the eggs without being asked. Lily thanked him with genuine warmth. They ate supper discussing the garden, the ranch, anything but themselves. It wasn't intimate conversation, but it was conversation more than they'd managed in the month she'd been there. When Wade headed to his room that night, he paused at her door. "Lily." "Yes," her voice came muffled through the wood. "Thank you for the curtains, and the garden, and everything." A long pause. "You're welcome. Wade, good night." "Good night." It wasn't much. They were still strangers in most ways, still careful and distant. But as Wade lay in his narrow bed, he thought about her worry over the seedlings, the way she'd looked in the lightning's flash, how natural it had felt to work beside her in the muddy garden. Not love. He wouldn't let it be love. But perhaps friendship wasn't impossible. Perhaps two damaged people could build something livable from the ruins of their separate disappointments. Perhaps practical could occasionally include moments of warmth. Outside, nightbirds called across the prairie. Inside, two people slept in separate rooms, a little less alone than they'd been that morning. The hair clip appeared on a Tuesday morning in May, sitting beside Lily's coffee cup like a question mark. It was a simple thing, tortoiseshell, practical rather than pretty, the kind sold at Morrison's general store for 30 cents. Wade had already left for the range, so there was no one to ask about it, no one to thank. Lily picked it up carefully, turning it over in her work-worn hands. In 2 months of marriage, Wade had never given her anything beyond her weekly household allowance. This small token felt enormous in its unexpectedness. She wore it to pull back the strands that always escaped her bun while cooking. When Wade came in for lunch, his eyes flicked to it once, then away. He said nothing. She said nothing, but she wore it every day after that. The silence between them had evolved into something different from those first awkward weeks. Not comfortable exactly, but familiar. They developed a language of gestures and small actions that somehow said more than words. Wade began leaving coffee ready in the pot when he rose extra early. Lily started packing him lunch on days she knew he'd be working far from the house. He chopped extra wood without being asked. She mended his shirts with special care, reinforcing the places that wore thin first. "Your missus sure knows her way around a needle," Jake commented one afternoon, admiring Wade's newly patched jacket. Martha Henderson was saying at church how Lily helped her figure out that pattern she'd been struggling with. Wade grunted acknowledgement, but inside, something warmed. Lily had been attending church with him, part of keeping up appearances, but he hadn't known she was making friends. That evening, he found her on the porch again, her habitual spot for watching sunsets. This time, he joined her without hesitation, taking what had become his place on the steps. "Heard you helped Martha Henderson," he said without preamble. "She was having trouble with a jacket pattern. Simple fix, really." Lily touched the hair clip absently. "She invited me to the quilting circle Thursday afternoons." "You going? Would you mind? I could go after the weekly baking's done." "Course not. Be good for you to, that is, if you want to go." She smiled a real smile, not the polite expression she wore for others. "I think I would. It's been a long time since I had women friends." "What about in Chicago before?" The question slipped out before Wade could stop it. They'd developed an unspoken agreement not to discuss their pasts, but lately he found himself curious about hers. Lily's smile faded, but she didn't shut down as he'd expected. "Charles and I, we kept to ourselves mostly, and after he died, well, factory girls don't have much time for socializing." "How did he die, if you don't mind saying?" "Consumption. Took 2 years to waste away." Her voice held old pain, weathered smooth. "He was a clerk in a shipping office, a good man, gentle, not strong, but kind." Wade tried to picture Lily with a gentle clerk and found he couldn't. She seemed made for this harder life, shaped by prairie wind and honest work. "We never had children," she continued softly. "Wanted them, but then he got sick, and afterward I was grateful. How would I have managed in that factory with babies to care for?" The raw honesty of it hit Wade unexpectedly. He thought of his own dreams of children, of teaching sons to ride and daughters to, well, those dreams had died with Margaret's departure. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. "Don't be. I mourned him, mourned what we never had. But that life feels like something I dreamed once. This," she gestured at the wide sky, "the endless grass. This feels more real than those years in Chicago ever did." They sat quietly as bats began their evening hunt, wheeling and diving in the gathering dusk. Wade found himself studying her profile, the way the fading light caught in the wisps of hair the clip couldn't quite contain. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for the hair clip." He shifted uncomfortably. "Noticed you were always pushing your hair back while cooking." "It's perfect, practical." "Like us," Wade said without thinking, then wished he could call the words back. But Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, like us." The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then Lily stood, brushing off her skirt. I should get supper started. I'll bring in more water, Wade offered, standing too. They moved toward their tasks, but at the door, Lily paused. Wade, I'm glad it's real. This life, even if it's not what either of us planned. Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving him standing in the purple dusk with something tight and warm in his chest. The next morning brought a crisis. One of Wade's best breeding cows had gotten tangled in wire and torn her leg badly. Wade and Jake spent hours treating the wound, but infection set in fast. By evening, the animal was suffering. Have to put her down, Jake said quietly. No saving her now. Wade nodded, sick at the loss. She'd been expensive bloodstock, meant to improve the herd, another setback in a year full of them. He was cleaning his rifle when Lily appeared in the barn, carrying coffee. Thought you might need this, she said, taking in the situation with quick understanding. I'm sorry about the cow. Part of ranching, Wade said shortly, not wanting sympathy. But Lily just nodded. Charles used to say that about his illness, part of living. Didn't make it easier. She handed him the coffee. I'll keep supper warm for when you're finished. After she left, Jake whistled low. That one understands more than she lets on. Wade had to agree. Lily had a way of knowing when to push and when to let be, when to offer comfort and when to offer silence. It was a skill born of her own hardships, he supposed. The next day, he found her in the garden, waging war on weeds with fierce concentration. Without discussion, he knelt beside her and began working the next row. They worked in companionable silence until the sun peeked overhead. We make a good team, Lily said, sitting back on her heels to survey their progress. Suppose we do. She glanced at him sideways. In the garden, at least. In the garden, Wade agreed, but he was thinking about more than vegetables. That Thursday, Lily went to the quilting circle. Wade found himself watching the clock, noting when she should return, when she came in later than expected, flushed and animated. He realized he'd been worried. How was it? He asked, trying to sound casual. Wonderful. She unpinned her hat, movements quick with excitement. They're making a wedding quilt for the Baxter girl, and I showed them a pattern my mother taught me. They want me to teach it next week. Your mother was a quilter. Lily's animation dimmed slightly. Before she died, yes, when I was 12. She hung her hat carefully. Anyway, Mary Sullivan said to tell you Jake's planning to move the cattle to the eastern pasture tomorrow. Wade recognized the deflection, but let it pass. He was learning Lily's rhythms when she'd share and when she'd retreat into herself like a turtle into its shell. Over the following weeks, the hair clip became a constant. Wade found himself noticing it at odd moments when Lily bent over the account books, her face intent with concentration, when she laughed at something Mary Sullivan said after church, when she stood at the stove, humming tunelessly while she cooked. He'd never heard her hum before the hair clip. One evening, a package arrived from Chicago Lily's books, finally forwarded from storage. Wade helped her carry the crate inside, curious despite himself. Charles loved books, she said, unpacking them reverently. It's all I kept of his. The volumes were worn but well cared for. Shakespeare, Dickens, some poetry, practical guides to farming and animal husbandry. Wade picked up one of the farming guides, surprised. You were planning to farm? Charles was. He had dreams of leaving the city, starting fresh somewhere. She smiled sadly. He'd have liked it here. I think would have liked you. It was the first time she'd suggested any connection between her past and present. Wade didn't know what to say, so he helped her arrange the books on the empty shelf he'd built years ago for a different woman's belongings. You could read them, Lily offered, anytime you like. Might do that, Wade said, though he hadn't read for pleasure since before. That night after supper, instead of heading to the barn, He pulled down a volume of poetry. Lily looked up from her mending in surprise, but said nothing, just smiled, that small, real smile he was starting to watch for. They sat in the lamplight, him reading, her sewing like any long-married couple, except for the careful distance between their chairs, except for the way they said goodnight at bedroom doors at opposite ends of the hall. But when Wade glanced up once to find Lily watching him with something soft in her expression, when she quickly looked away with color in her cheeks, he wondered if maybe the distance wasn't as fixed as they'd assumed, if maybe two practical people could build something more than a business arrangement, given time and patience and small gestures like tortoiseshell hair clips. He thought about saying something, but the moment passed. Lily gathered her mending, bid him good night in her usual quiet way. Wade watched her go, the lamplight catching on the clip that held her hair, the small gift that had somehow begun to bridge the space between them. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow he might sit a little closer. Tomorrow he might ask about her mother, her childhood, the dreams she'd had before life taught her to be practical. Tomorrow he might tell her about his own dreams, the ones that hadn't died with Margaret's leaving. But tonight, it was enough to sit in his house that no longer felt empty, reading poetry by lamplight, knowing she was near. It was enough to be not quite alone, not quite together, but something in between that had its own unexpected sweetness. The poetry book spoke of grand passions and desperate love. Wade understood now that there were other kinds of love, quiet kinds that grew slowly in gardens and over-account books, in shared silences and small gifts, the kind that didn't announce itself with fanfare but crept in like morning light. So gradual you didn't notice until suddenly the darkness was gone. He marked his place and closed the book. Tomorrow. He thought again. Tomorrow. The smell of smoke reached Wade before he saw the flames. He'd been working the far pasture with Jake when one of the younger hands came riding hard, his horse lathered with sweat. Fire, boss, the barn's caught. Wade's blood turned to ice. The barn held not just equipment and feed, but half their winter hay supply. He spurred Dust Devil harder than he ever had, racing across the prairie with Jake close behind. As they crested the final hill, his worst fears were confirmed. Orange flames licked at the barn's west wall, smoke billowing black against the summer sky. But what stopped his heart wasn't the fire. It was the figure silhouetted against the flames, leading horses from the burning structure. Lily! She emerged from the smoke leading his prize mare, her face streaked with soot, her skirts singed. Without pausing, she handed the horse off to Tommy Baxter and plunged back into the inferno. Lily! Wade leaped from his horse before it had fully stopped, but Jake caught his arm. She's got help. Jake pointed to where several ranch hands had formed a bucket brigade. We need to save what we can. Every instinct screamed at Wade to rush after Lily, but Jake was right. They needed organization, not panic. Wade forced himself to think strategically, directing men to wet down the house roof, others to move equipment away from the barn, all while his eyes tracked that stubborn figure darting in and out of danger. She emerged again, this time carrying armfuls of harnesses and ropes. Her hair had come completely loose from its pins, streaming wild around her face. The tortoiseshell clip was nowhere to be seen. The feed store's still clear, she called to the men, her voice hoarse from smoke. If we can keep the fire from spreading east. A beam cracked ominously inside the barn. Wade's decision was instant. Everyone back, let it burn, save what's outside. But the saddles, Lily protested. Leave them. The sharpness in his voice made her flinch, but Wade didn't care. He'd lost too much already. He wouldn't lose her too. For hours they fought to contain the blaze, keeping it from spreading to other structures. Lily worked alongside the men, hauling water, beating at spot fires with wet blankets, her face set with fierce determination. When Mary Sullivan arrived with other neighbors to help, Lily barely paused to acknowledge them. By sunset, the barn was a smoking ruin, but they'd saved the house, the feed store, and most of the livestock. Men sprawled exhausted on the ground, faces black with soot, clothes ruined. Wade found Lily sitting on the porch steps, staring at the devastation.
30 saddles,
she said dully. All that tack, the hay. It's just things, Wade said, sinking beside her.
They can be replaced. With what money?
She turned to him, and he saw tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face.
I know what the books say. Wade, this could ruin us.
Us. The word hit him like a physical blow. When had she started thinking in terms of us? We'll manage, he said. Always do.
I should have seen it sooner,
if I'd been paying attention instead of doing laundry. Stop. Wade caught her shoulders, turning her to face him. You saved the horses. You organized the bucket brigade. You did more than anyone could expect. It wasn't enough. It was everything. His hands tightened on her shoulders. When I saw you running into that barn, Lily, I thought... His voice cracked. She looked up at him, something shifting in her smoke-reddened eyes. Wade. He should let her go, should step back, rebuild the careful distance between them. Instead, he pulled her against him, holding her tight while she shook with delayed reaction and exhaustion. Don't ever scare me like that again, he whispered into her smoke-scented hair. She laughed wetly against his chest. I was trying to save our livelihood. Damn the livelihood. The vehemence in his voice surprised them both. Nothing in that barn was worth risking, worth losing. He stopped, suddenly aware of what he was saying, what he was feeling. Lily pulled back slightly, looking up at him with wide eyes. Wade, Boss, Jake's voice broke the moment. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to figure out shelter for the horses tonight. Wade released Lily reluctantly, his hands sliding away from her shoulders. She stood quickly, wrapping her arms around herself as if cold despite the warm evening. I'll get coffee started, she said, and food. Everyone needs to eat. She fled toward the house, leaving Wade with a hollow feeling that had nothing to do with the lost barn. Jake studied him with knowing eyes, but wisely said nothing. They worked through the night, setting up temporary shelters for the animals, salvaging what they could from the ruins. Lily kept coffee flowing and produced sandwiches from somewhere, moving among the workers with quiet efficiency. But she avoided Wade's eyes, always finding somewhere else to be when he approached. Near dawn, as the last of the helpers headed home with thanks and promises of reciprocal aid, Wade found her standing where the barn door used to be. She'd tried to pin her hair back up, but without the clip, it kept escaping. You should rest, he said. I lost your mother's clip, she said unexpectedly. The one you gave me. It must have fallen out in the fire. It's just a thing. Lily, like I said, it wasn't just a thing. She turned to face him, exhaustion and something else written on her features. It was the first gift anyone's given me in years. The first sign that I wasn't just furniture in your life. The words hung between them in the gray pre-dawn light. You were never furniture, Wade said roughly. Not from the first day. Then what am I? The question came out barely above a whisper. What are we? Wade didn't have an answer. They'd built something over these months' partnership. Friendship. A quiet kind of caring. But putting names to it felt dangerous. Like tempting fate. Tired, he said finally. We're tired and covered in soot and standing in the ashes of our barn. This isn't the time. It's never the time, Lily interrupted. We're very good at finding reasons not to talk about things. She was right. They'd become experts at circling around the growing connection between them, at maintaining safe distances even as those distances shrank. After we rebuild, Wade said, after we figure out how to recover from this, then we can talk about... No. Lily's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. I've spent 3 years living for after Charles got well, after I paid the debts. After I saved enough to leave the factory, I'm done waiting for after. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her gray-green eyes,
the smudge of soot she'd missed on her jaw. "I could have lost you today," she said. "When that beam cracked, when the roof started to sag, I thought about you inside, and I couldn't breathe. That's when I knew." "Knew what?" Wade's voice came out rough. "That somewhere between the hair clip and the account books and watching sunsets on the porch, I started caring about you as more than a business partner." She laughed shakily. "Which wasn't part of our arrangement, I know." Wade's hand moved without his permission, brushing the soot from her jaw with his thumb. "Lily, I'm not asking for grand declarations," she hurried on. "I know what we agreed. I know you don't, that you can't—" He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss or a particularly skilled one. It was desperate and smoke-flavored and full of all the fear he'd felt watching her run into flames. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lily's eyes were wide with shock. "I thought I was done with feeling," Wade said roughly. "Thought Margaret had killed that part of me. But you, with your practical ways and your garden and your quiet strength, you made me care again, made me want again." "Wade, I'm not good at this anymore. Maybe I never was, but when I saw you in that fire, all I could think was that I'd been a fool to waste these months keeping you at arm's length." Lily's hand came up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his stubbled cheek. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Two people so afraid of being hurt again we nearly missed what was right in front of us." "Are we missing it now?" Wade asked. Instead of answering with words, Lily kissed him. This kiss was different, softer, sweeter, with promise rather than desperation. When it ended, they stood forehead to forehead, holding each other up as much as holding each other close. "We smell like a chimney," Lily murmured. "We look worse," Wade agreed. "We should probably discuss what this means for our arrangement." "Probably." Neither moved. Around them, dawn was breaking properly now, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The ruined barn looked less devastating in the gentle light, more like a problem to be solved than a catastrophe. "I want to court you," Wade said suddenly. "Properly, the way I should have from the start." Lily pulled back to look at him. "Wade Johnson, we're already married." "Only on paper. You deserve better than a business arrangement. You deserve flowers and Sunday drives and all the things I was too broken to offer before." "I don't need those things." "Maybe I need to give them." He tucked a strand of her wild hair behind her ear. "Maybe I need to prove to both of us that this is real, that it's more than just mutual convenience." Lily studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, court me then, but I warn you I'm out of practice with romance." "So am I. We'll figure it out together." "Together," she repeated softly. I like the sound of that. Jake appeared around the corner of the house, took one look at them standing close together, and immediately backed away. "Sorry, boss. Didn't mean to. Coffee's ready in the kitchen when you're ready." After he fled, Lily giggled, actually giggled. Wade couldn't remember hearing her make that sound before. It transformed her soot-stained face into something almost girlish. "Poor Jake," she said. "We've probably scandalized him." "He'll survive." Wade reluctantly released her. "We should get cleaned up. Long day ahead." "Wade." She caught his hand as he turned to go. "I'm glad we saved the horses, but I'm gladder we saved us." He squeezed her fingers. Understanding completely, they'd lost a barn but found each other in the ashes. It seemed like a fair trade. As they walked toward the house hand in hand, Wade noticed something glinting in the dirt. He bent to retrieve it, the tortoiseshell hair clip. Singed but intact. "Look," he said, holding it out to Lily. She took it with trembling fingers, her eyes filling. "It survived." "Things do that sometimes," Wade said. "Survive when you think they're lost. Come out stronger for the burning." Lily looked from the clip to him, understanding passing between them. "Yes," she said softly. "They do." She slipped the clip into her pocket and took his hand again. Together, they walked toward the house,
leaving footprints in the ash but facing forward, toward whatever came next. The barn could be rebuilt. Their marriage, their real marriage, was just beginning. The morning after the fire dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself was offering a fresh start. Wade woke in his narrow bed, muscles aching from the night's exertions, and lay still for a moment, remembering. The kiss, the confession, the promise of something new. From the kitchen came familiar sounds, the clatter of pans, the hiss of coffee on the stove. But everything felt different now, charged with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. He found Lily at the stove, her hair neatly pinned with the salvaged clip. She'd scrubbed away the soot, but faint shadows under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. When she turned at his entrance, color bloomed in her cheeks. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning." He wanted to cross to her, take her in his arms again, but the daylight made him uncertain. What seemed clear in the emotional aftermath of the fire felt more complicated in the ordinary kitchen. "Coffee's ready, and breakfast." She busied herself with plates, not quite meeting his eyes. "Jake's already here. He's assessing what we can salvage from the barn." Wade accepted the normalcy gratefully, though something in him rebelled at stepping back into their old patterns. "I'll join him after I eat." They moved around each other with exaggerated care, as if the wrong word or gesture might shatter whatever fragile new thing existed between them. It wasn't until Lily reached past him for the sugar bowl and he caught her hand that the tension broke. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We're acting like strangers." "Aren't we?" She looked up at him. "In some ways this, whatever this is, it changes things." "Everything," Wade agreed. "But maybe that's good. Maybe we needed changing." Before she could respond, Jake's voice boomed from outside. "Boss, you need to see this." They found Jake standing amid the barn ruins with several neighbors who'd returned to help. But instead of the grim faces Wade expected, people were smiling. "Look there." Jake pointed to a section of charred timber. "Fire started here. See the char pattern? And smell that." Wade knelt, catching an acrid chemical scent beneath the smoke. "Coal oil." "That's right. This weren't no accident. Boss, someone set this fire deliberate." A cold rage swept through Wade. Bad enough to lose the barn to fate, but sabotage, who would? Same folks who've been giving other ranchers trouble. Bill Martinez said, having arrived with the morning crew. Heard tell the Wilsons found their fence cut last week, and someone poisoned Tom Rodriguez as well. Land grabbers. Jake spat. Trying to force folks out so they can buy cheap. Wade thought of the loan he'd finally secured for the Higgins property, the expansion plans that would now have to wait. Someone wanted him to fail. Wanted all of them to fail. "We need to organize," he said. "Get all the ranchers together. If someone's targeting us—" "Already on it," Bill interrupted. "Meeting tonight at the church, 7 sharp." As the men dispersed to various tasks, Lily touched Wade's arm. "This is dangerous. If someone's willing to burn barns—" "I know." He covered her hand with his. "But we can't let them drive us off. This is our home." "Our home," she repeated, and something in how she said it made Wade's chest tight. "Then we fight for it, together." The day passed in a blur of salvage work and preparations. Word of the arson spread quickly, bringing more neighbors to help and share their own suspicions. By evening, Wade was exhausted but grimly determined. He cleaned up hastily for the meeting, finding Lily waiting in the kitchen wearing her good green dress. "You're coming?" he asked, surprised. "Of course. This affects me too." She lifted her chin with that stubborn look he'd come to recognize. "Unless you'd prefer I stay home like a proper wife." "I'd prefer you beside me," Wade said honestly. "Always." The simple declaration hung between them. Then Lily smiled, that real smile he was learning to treasure, and took his offered arm. The church was packed. Every small rancher in the valley had come. Faces set with shared determination. Reverend Porter had yielded his pulpit to the meeting, understanding that sometimes earthly justice needed planning too. "We all know why we're here," Bill Martinez began. "Someone wants our land, and they're willing to burn us out to get it." "It's that Eastern Syndicate," Tom Rodriguez said, "the one buying up failed ranches. They offered me half what my place is worth last month." "Offered," Jake snorted. "More like threatened. Told me I'd be smart to take their price while I could still walk away." The meeting erupted in angry voices, everyone sharing stories of intimidation and sabotage. Wade noticed Lily taking notes, her quick mind already working on patterns. "Getting angry won't help," Martha Henderson's clear voice cut through the noise. "We need a plan." "Guard rotations," Wade suggested. "No ranch left unwatched if we work together." "And what about those of us who can't spare the men?" Ed Baxter asked. His struggle to keep his ranch had left him with skeleton crew. "Then we share crews," Wade said firmly. "This valley rises or falls together." The meeting continued late into the night, hammering out details of mutual defense and support. Lily contributed practical suggestions about communication systems and supply sharing that earned approving nods. As they finally headed home under a canopy of stars, Wade felt the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders. He'd always focused on his own ranch, his own success. Now he was responsible for neighbors, friends, a whole community under threat. "You did well tonight," Lily said softly. "They look to you." "I never wanted to be a leader." "The best ones never do." She squeezed his arm. "But you are one, whether you wanted it or not. They trust you." "And you?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. "Do you trust me?" Lily stopped walking, turning to face him in the moonlight. "With my life, haven't I proved that?" "I meant," Wade struggled for words. "This morning, in the kitchen, you seemed uncertain about us." "Not uncertain, just adjusting." She reached up to touch his face. "For months, I've kept my feelings locked away. It's hard to suddenly let them free." "I know." He covered her hand with his. "I've been doing the same thing. Afraid to want again, afraid to hope." "Are you still afraid?" "Terrified," Wade admitted, "but more afraid of losing you than of loving you." Lily's breath caught. "Is that what this is, love?" The word hung between them, enormous and fragile. Wade had sworn never to say it again, never to feel it again. But standing here with this remarkable woman who'd walked into his ordered life and quietly revolutionized everything. "I think it might be," he said carefully. "If we let it." "I want a real marriage, Wade." The words came out in a rush. Not just partnership or friendship or fond feelings. "I want to wake up beside you. I want children. I want to build a life together that's more than just surviving." Wade's heart hammered against his ribs. Everything she was offering was everything he'd once dreamed of and thought lost forever. "Lily, I know we agreed to a business arrangement. If that's still all you want, I'll honor it. But I need to know." He silenced her with a kiss, pouring all his fear and hope and growing love into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want it all," he said roughly. "Everything you said and more. I want to court you properly and marry you again in front of the whole town and give you babies and grow old watching sunsets from our porch. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're there and go to sleep every night holding you close. Is that enough? Is that what you're asking for?" Lily was crying, tears silver in the moonlight. "It's everything. It's more than I dared hope for when I stepped off that stage." "Then it's yours. I'm yours. If you'll have me not as a business partner, but as a husband, a real husband." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." They stood wrapped in each other's arms in the middle of the dusty road, sealing their new covenant with kisses that tasted of tears and promises. When they finally continued home, Wade kept his arm around Lily's waist, unwilling to maintain even that small distance.
There's one problem, Lily said as they reached the house. We're already married. We can't exactly court and marry again. Watch me, Wade said with determination that made her laugh. I'm going to court you so thoroughly that everyone in Silverado Creek will forget that disaster last October. And then we're going to stand in that church again and do it right this time. People will think we're crazy. Let them. He pulled her close on the porch steps, their favorite spot for important conversations. Oh. I spent months caring what people think, hiding behind pride and practicality. I'm done with that. I love you, Lily Fairchild Johnson, and I want the whole world to know it. She kissed him then, sweet and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, she was smiling that radiant smile that transformed her face. I love you too, Wade, despite your stubbornness and your silence and your terrible coffee. My coffee's not that bad, he protested, making her laugh again. They sat together on the steps, watching the stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow would bring challenges rebuilding the barn, defending against whoever threatened their valley, learning to be truly married instead of politely distant. But tonight, they had each other and the promises they'd made and the love they'd finally admitted. Lily, Wade said after a comfortable silence, thank you for walking into that church. Thank you for taking a chance on a bitter, broken man and his dusty ranch. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Thank you for the hair clip, and for waiting until I was brave enough to want more than safety. We're quite a pair, aren't we? The best kind, Lily said firmly. The kind that knows what loss feels like and chooses love anyway. Wade pressed a kiss to her hair, marveling at how much had changed since that morning. The barn was still ashes, danger still threatened, but somehow none of that seemed insurmountable now. They had each other. They had love. They had a real marriage to build from the foundation of their careful partnership. Let's go inside, he said finally. Long day tomorrow. Wade. Lily stood but didn't move toward the door. I meant what I said, about waking up beside you. His breath caught. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She held out her hand. Take me to bed. Husband. Our bed. Let's start this marriage properly. Wade took her hand, his heart full to bursting. Together they entered the house that would truly be their home now, leaving the careful distances and polite arrangements behind. Tomorrow they would face whatever came land grabbers, gossip, the challenge of rebuilding. But tonight was theirs, the beginning of their real story. As he led Lily down the hall, not to separate rooms but to their room, their bed, their future, Wade sent up a prayer of gratitude. He'd thought himself broken beyond repair, frozen beyond thawing. But Lily had walked into his life and changed everything with her quiet strength and patient heart. Sometimes the best love stories weren't the ones that started with lightning strikes and grand passion. Sometimes they began with two wounded people choosing to heal together, building something beautiful from the ashes of their separate griefs. And sometimes, Wade thought as he closed the bedroom door behind them, shutting out everything but the woman he loved. Sometimes you had to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you actually needed. The train to Denver swayed and clacked through mountain passes dusted with early September snow. Wade watched Lily's face as she pressed close to the window, her eyes bright with wonder at scenery she'd only imagined. 3 months had passed since the fire, since the night everything changed between them. 3 months of rebuilding not just the barn, but their entire relationship. Look, she breathed, pointing at an eagle circling above the peaks. I've never seen mountains like these. Wade smiled, his arm tightening around her waist. They'd managed to secure the loan for the Higgins property after all. And with the land grabbers caught and run out of the valley, thanks to their neighbors' vigilance, the ranch was thriving. This trip to Denver was part business, part delayed honeymoon, though Wade had kept the latter purpose secret. Wait until you see the city, he said. It's grown twice the size since I was last there. I don't need a city, Lily said, turning to him. But I'm grateful you're showing me one. The tenderness in her voice still caught him off guard sometimes.
The past months had been a revelation, learning to share not just space, but life, discovering the 1,000 small ways two people could fit together. The separate bedrooms were a memory now, replaced by the sweet intimacy of marriage properly embraced. Denver sprawled before them in the afternoon light. A booming frontier city of brick buildings and grand aspirations. Wade had wired ahead for rooms at the Windsor Hotel, the finest in the city. When Lily saw the marble lobby with its crystal chandeliers, she stopped short. "Wade, this must cost." "Let me spoil you," he said quietly. "Just this once, please." Something in his tone made her relent. She didn't know about the ring in his pocket, the one he'd commissioned from Denver's best jeweler. The simple band she wore, purchased hastily for their practical ceremony, had been bothering him for weeks. Their room overlooked the busy streets, with real glass windows and indoor plumbing that made Lily laugh with delight. Hot water just by turning a handle. Can you imagine? Wade could imagine installing such conveniences at the ranch if she wanted them. He'd install the moon if it would make her smile like that. That evening, he took her to the Palace Theater. She'd changed into her best dress, still simple by city standards, but she wore it like a queen. As they walked through the lobby, Wade noticed other men noticing his wife. The fierce pride he felt surprised him. Not possession, but appreciation that this remarkable woman had chosen him. The play was Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, which made Wade wince internally. Perhaps not the best choice for a couple who understood how love stories could go wrong, but Lily was transfixed, leaning forward in her seat, completely absorbed. During intermission, as they sipped champagne in the glittering lobby, she turned to him with shining eyes. "They're so young, so certain that love conquers everything." "You don't think it does?" "I think," she said carefully, "that real love is what comes after the conquest, when you choose each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Wade set down his glass and took her hand. "Lily, there's something—" Mr. Johnson, fancy meeting you here." Wade turned to find Theodore Hartwell, the banker who'd initially refused his loan. The man's unctuous smile made Wade's jaw clench. "Mr. Hartwell," he acknowledged coolly. "And this must be your wife, Charming." "Absolutely charming." Hartwell's eyes assessed Lily like she was livestock. "You know, Johnson, now that you're properly settled, we should discuss expanded credit options. A man with your holdings and such a respectable wife, well, the bank would be pleased to accommodate." "The same bank that wouldn't lend to me 8 months ago." Wade's voice was dangerously quiet. Hartwell had the grace to flush. "Policies change. Surely you understand business." "I understand plenty." Wade pulled Lily closer. "I understand that my ranch succeeded without your help, and it'll keep succeeding the same way. Good evening." He guided Lily away, leaving Hartwell sputtering. In the hallway, Lily touched his rigid arm. "That was the banker who rejected you before." "Because I wasn't married. Because a single man wasn't stable enough." The old bitterness crept into his voice. "If it weren't for their stupid policies, I'd never have—" He stopped, horror washing through him. Lily's face had gone very still. "You'd never have sent for me," she finished quietly. "Never have married a stranger." "Lily, I didn't mean—" "No, you're right." She pulled away slightly. "If that bank had given you the loan, you'd probably be married to some rancher's daughter by now. Someone young and pretty who'd never worked in a factory or—" "Stop!" Wade caught her shoulders. "Look at me." She did, her chin raised but her eyes suspiciously bright. "If that bank had given me the loan," Wade said firmly, "I'd be successful and miserable. I'd have land and cattle and an empty house. I'd never have known what it was like to watch you conquer that garden, or see you stand up to Tom Rodriguez when he tried to shortchange us on feed. I'd never have discovered that happiness isn't about having what you planned. It's about being grateful for what you never knew you needed." "Wade, I'm trying to say this right." He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out the small velvet box. "I bought you something.
Because you deserve better than that plain band we got in a hurry. Because I want you to have something that shows. Wade Johnson, what did you do? But her protest was weak, her eyes fixed on the box. He opened it to reveal a gold ring set with a modest but perfect diamond, flanked by 2 small emeralds that matched her eyes. I want to do this properly, here in this fancy place, with champagne and Shakespeare and all the romance I was too broken to offer before. He dropped to one knee right there in the theater hallway, ignoring the gasps of passing patrons. Lily Fairchild Johnson, love of my life. Will you marry me again properly this time? Lily was crying and laughing simultaneously. You ridiculous, wonderful man. We're already married. Not the way you deserve to be. Not with flowers and music and the whole town celebrating. Not with vows I mean from my soul instead of just my sense of duty. He stayed on his knee, hope and fear warring in his chest. Say yes, Lily. Let me court you and marry you the way I should have from the beginning. She dropped to her knees too, cupping his face in her hands. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Though you should know I'd marry you in that burned barn with Jake as witness if that's all we had. He kissed her there on the floor of the Palace Theater, not caring who saw, when they finally helped each other up. A small crowd had gathered, applauding. Lily hid her face against Wade's shoulder, but she was smiling. Back in their hotel room, she admired the ring in the lamplight while Wade admired her. The months of hard work and sunshine had goldened her skin, strengthened her already strong frame. She was beautiful to him in ways that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness. Tell me about Denver, she said, curling against him on the elegant sofa. What else will you show me? Everything. The botanical gardens, the art museum, restaurants with food you've never imagined. We'll buy you dresses. I don't need dresses. Books, then. All the books you want. And things for the house, real curtains, not made from cut-up clothes. Maybe one of those newfangled sewing machines. You don't have to buy me things, Wade. I want to give you everything I was too scared and stubborn to offer before. He kissed her temple. Let me make up for lost time. We didn't lose time, Lily said firmly. We were finding our way to each other. If we'd tried to force it earlier. She trailed off, then continued more softly. I wasn't ready earlier. Neither were you. We needed those months of careful distance to appreciate what closeness could be. Wade thought about that as they prepared for bed in the same room, the same bed, as natural now as breathing. Maybe she was right. Maybe their love story needed to unfold exactly as it had 2 wounded people slowly learning to trust, to hope, to reach for happiness again. I love you, he told her as they settled into the luxurious bed. Have I said that today? Only 12 times. She smiled against his shoulder. I don't mind hearing it again. I love you, Lily Johnson. I love your strength and your stubbornness. I love how you hum when you're happy and how you attack weeds like they personally offended you. I love that you see our life as worth fighting for. Our life, she repeated softly. I love the sound of that, almost as much as I love you. The next morning brought a telegram that made Wade frown. Jake says everything's fine, but Martha Henderson's been asking for you. Something about the quilting circle. Oh, Lily's face lit up. They must have finished it. Finished what? But she just smiled mysteriously. You'll see when we get home. Their remaining days in Denver passed in a blur of new experiences. Lily insisted on seeing everything from the Grand Opera House to the stockyards. She charmed everyone they met with her directness and curiosity. At a bookshop, Wade watched her run reverent fingers over leather-bound volumes, selecting carefully within the generous budget he'd set. For our children, she said quietly when she chose a book of fairy tales. Someday. The hope in her voice made his throat tight. Children. Their children. Another dream he'd thought lost forever now possible again. On their last night, they dined at the Windsor's Grand Restaurant, Lily wore a new dress Wade had convinced her to buy, deep green that brought out her eyes. She'd let her hair down, pinned only at the sides with new combs that sparkled in the gaslight. "You're staring," she murmured over dessert. "Can't help it. My wife is the most beautiful woman in Denver." "Wade Johnson, you need spectacles." "I see perfect clear." He reached for her hand across the white tablecloth. "I see a woman who brought a dead man back to life, who made a house into a home, who stands beside me against whatever comes." "Speaking of whatever comes," Lily said, her free hand moving to her stomach in a gesture he'd noticed more frequently lately. "Wade, I have something to tell you." His heart stopped. "Lily." I wanted to be sure before I said anything, but I saw a doctor here, a real city doctor, and he confirmed it. Her eyes shone with tears and joy. "We're going to have a baby, in the spring." Wade was around the table before he knew he'd moved, pulling her up into his arms, not caring that the entire restaurant was watching. "A baby," he breathed against her hair. "Our baby." "You're happy." There was just a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "Happy?" He pulled back to look at her. "Lily, you've given me everything. A home, a love I never thought I'd find. And now a child I'm so far beyond happy I don't have words." She laughed, that free, joyous sound he loved. "Good, because I was terrified to tell you. We never really talked about children, and I wasn't sure." He silenced her with a kiss that was probably too passionate for public. But he didn't care. His wife, his love, was carrying their child. The family he'd dreamed of and given up on was actually happening. Later, walking through the cool Denver night back to their hotel, Lily leaned against him contentedly. "It's been quite a week," she said. "Theater, fancy dinners, a new ring, a baby announcement. You certainly know how to show a girl a time, Mr. Johnson." "Just wait until I get you home," he promised. "That's when the real courting begins." "Wade, I already said yes to everything. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He stopped walking, turning to face her under a street lamp. "You took a chance on a bitter stranger. You deserve to be courted and cherished and loved properly. So that's what I'm going to do, every day for the rest of our lives." "That's a long time," she said softly. "Not long enough." As they continued back to the hotel, Wade thought about the man he'd been a year ago, broken, frozen, certain he'd never love again. That man could never have imagined this moment, walking through a city night with his wife, his true wife, planning a future that included children and laughter and love that grew stronger with each passing day. Tomorrow they'd take the train home. He'd show the whole town that Lily Johnson was loved, cherished, chosen. They'd have that second wedding, the one she deserved. And in the spring, they'd welcome their child into a home built on something stronger than mere romance, on partnership, friendship, and the choice to love even when love seemed impossible. "What are you thinking?" Lily asked. "About miracles," Wade answered honestly, "and how sometimes they walk into your life wearing a worn black dress and carrying carpetbags full of books." She laughed, the sound echoing off the buildings. "Practical miracles. The best kind." "The only kind that lasts." Wade agreed, and led his miracle of a wife inside, toward their future, toward home. The church bells rang different this time, joyful, celebratory, alive with promise. October sunshine streamed through the windows of Silverado Creek's little church, illuminating the crowd that had gathered to witness something they'd been waiting a year to see: Wade and Lily Johnson getting married properly. "Nervous?" Jake asked, standing beside Wade at the altar where he'd once stood alone. "No," Wade answered honestly. "Should have done this the first time." The church was transformed. Lily's quilting circle had outdone themselves with white ribbons and autumn wildflowers. The whole town had turned out, filling every pew and standing along the walls. Even old Tom Rodriguez had come, grudgingly admitting that Wade's wife had turned out all right after all.
The door opened, and Wade's breath caught. Lily stood silhouetted in golden light, wearing a cream-colored dress the women had secretly made for her. Her hair was swept up but softer than her usual severe style, with small flowers woven through it. The tortoiseshell clip survivor of fire and symbol of so much held it all in place. But it was her face that stopped his heart. Radiant didn't begin to describe it. She glowed with happiness and health, one hand resting on the gentle swell where their child grew. Their eyes met across the crowded church, and Wade saw his whole world in her smile. Mary Sullivan, serving as matron of honor, whispered something that made Lily laugh. Then, with Martha Henderson playing the old piano, Lily walked toward him. No hesitation this time, no business arrangement, just a woman walking toward the man she loved, surrounded by friends who'd watched their careful partnership bloom into something beautiful. When she reached him, Wade couldn't help himself. "You're beautiful," he murmured. "You're biased," she whispered back, but her eyes shone. Reverend Porter beamed at them both. "Dearly beloved, we gather today in joy rather than convenience, in celebration rather than arrangement. Wade and Lily have asked to renew and properly consecrate their vows, to declare before God and this community what has grown between them." Wade barely heard the familiar words. He was lost in Lily's eyes, in the miracle of second chances and love that grew slowly, steadily, like her garden plants. "Wade," Reverend Porter prompted, "your vows." Wade had prepared words, had practiced them, but looking at Lily, he forgot every carefully crafted phrase. "A year ago, I stood in this spot thinking my life was over," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was wrong. My life was waiting to begin." It walked through those doors wearing a practical black dress and carrying carpet bags full of books and courage I couldn't fathom. "Lily, you saw a bitter, broken man and somehow found something worth saving. You planted yourself in my life like you planted that garden with patience and determination and faith that something good could grow. You made my house a home, my ranch a success, and my heart whole again. I promise to love you with the same steady devotion you showed me, to stand beside you in drought and plenty, in fire and rebuilding, to cherish not just the big moments but all the small ones, every sunset on the porch, every account book balanced together, every morning I wake to find you there. I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father our children need, to court you until my last breath. Because you're worth every romantic gesture I was too foolish to make before, you saved me, Lily Johnson, and I'll spend my life trying to be worthy of that salvation." Lily was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. Several women in the congregation sniffled audibly. "Lily," Reverend Porter said gently, "your vows." She squeezed Wade's hands, taking a steady breath. "Wade Johnson, you impossible, wonderful man. You offered me a business arrangement and gave me a life. You promised me respect and gave me love. You said you wanted a partner and became my best friend, my beloved, my home. When I stepped off that stage, I thought I was trading one kind of survival for another. I never imagined I'd find this life we've built together, this love that grows stronger every day, this child that's the living proof of what we've become to each other. I promise to keep choosing you, every morning and every night, to stand with you against whatever threatens our valley, our neighbors, our family, to be your partner in work and play, in difficult times and abundant ones, to love you not just for who you are, but for who you're still becoming. You say I saved you, but the truth is we saved each other, and I promise to keep saving each other, again and again, for all our days." "The rings?" Reverend Porter asked. Wade slipped the new ring onto Lily's finger, where it gleamed alongside the simple band from their first wedding. "With this ring, I thee wed, again, properly, forever." Lily's hand trembled as she placed a new band on his finger, one she'd secretly purchased in Denver. "With this ring, I thee wed, by choice, in joy, for always. By the power vested in me in the state of Colorado," Reverend Porter announced, his voice thick with emotion. "I pronounce you still and more than ever husband and wife. Wade, you may kiss your bride." This kiss was nothing like the awkward absence of their first ceremony or the desperate passion of the fire's aftermath. This was a promise sealed, a future claimed, a love declared before everyone who mattered. The church erupted in cheers. Someone rang the bells with enthusiastic abandon. As Wade and Lily turned to face their community, hands clasped tight, the autumn sun blessed them through the windows. The reception spilled out of the church into the yard, where tables groaned under the weight of everyone's contributions. The quilting circle presented their gift, a magnificent wedding quilt featuring the pattern Lily's mother had taught her, now preserved in fabric and thread. "For your new baby," Martha Henderson said, making Lily cry all over again. Jake made a toast that had everyone laughing and crying in turns. "To Wade and Lily Johnson, proof that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters, and that the best love stories are worth waiting for." As afternoon faded to evening, Wade found Lily sitting on the church steps, the very steps where he'd sat alone a year ago. "Tired?" he asked, settling beside her. "Happy tired." She leaned against him, her hand finding his. "Look at this. Wade, our friends, our community, our life. Did you imagine this when you sent for a mail-order bride?" "Never," he admitted. "My imagination was never this good." "Mine either." She turned to look at him. "That woman who got off the stage thought she was just looking for a safe place to exist. She never dreamed she'd find a place to truly live. And that man waiting at the altar thought his heart was permanently frozen." Wade brought her hand to his lips. He never knew it was just waiting for the right woman to tend it, like a garden that looks dead until someone who understands growing things comes along. "Listen to you, talking poetry," Lily smiled. "What happened to my practical rancher?" He fell in love with a practical woman who taught him that practical and romantic don't have to be opposites. Young Tommy Baxter ran up, breathless with excitement. "Mrs. Johnson, Ma says to tell you she felt the baby kick. She says it's going to be a strong one." Lily laughed. "Tell your mother thank you, Tommy, and yes, this little one is already making its presence known." As Tommy scampered off, Wade placed his hand over Lily's stomach, feeling the flutter of movement that still amazed him. "Our child," he murmured, "growing in there right now, hearing all this joy. A good way to start life." Lily agreed, surrounded by love and community and possibility. The fiddler struck up a dancing tune, and calls went up for the bride and groom to lead. Wade stood, offering his hand with formal courtesy. "Mrs. Johnson, may I have this dance?" "Mr. Johnson, I thought you'd never ask." They danced in the churchyard as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Their neighbors clapped and cheered, celebrating not just a marriage, but a triumph proof that love could bloom in unlikely soil, that two wounded hearts could heal each other, that sometimes the best things came to those who waited. "I love you," Wade whispered as they swayed together. "I love you too," Lily replied. "Thank you for waiting for me." "I'd wait again," he said firmly. "If I had to stand at that altar alone a dozen times to find you, I'd do it gladly." "No more waiting," Lily said. "No more standing alone. From now on, we face everything together." "Together," Wade agreed, and spun his wife his true wife, his chosen wife under the first stars of evening. Later, much later, after the last guest had gone home and they'd returned to their ranch, Wade and Lily stood on their porch. The new barn rose sturdy in the moonlight, rebuilt stronger than before. The garden slept under its autumn mulch, ready for spring planting. Inside the house, baby clothes made by loving hands waited in the dresser Jake had built. "Look what we've made," Lily said softly. "Not just the ranch or the garden or even this little one, but a life, a real, full, beautiful life." From ashes, Wade agreed. from loneliness and loss and sheer stubborn determination.
The best things usually are. Lily turned in his arms, her face luminous in the moonlight. Wade, I'm glad the first wedding was what it was. Because this one we earned. This one we chose with our whole hearts. Every day, Wade promised, I'll choose you again. Every sunrise, every challenge, every joy, I choose you. And I choose you, Lily whispered. My unexpected blessing, my answered prayer I didn't even know to pray. They went inside together, to their home, their bed, their future, behind them. The vast prairie stretched under stars, witness to their journey from strangers to partners to lovers to family. Ahead lay challenges they couldn't imagine and joys they couldn't fathom, but they would meet them all together. These two souls who'd found each other across loss and learned that sometimes love's greatest gift is its perfect timing. In the spring, when their daughter was born with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin, they would name her Hope, because that's what she was, hope made flesh, love given form, the future taking its first breath in the arms of two people who'd almost given up on happily ever after. But that's a story for another day. Tonight, there was only a man and woman who'd waited at separate altars for their lives to begin, finally home in each other's arms. Proof that the best love stories are worth the wait. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Wade and Lily's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Where are you listening from? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to know where in the world this tale of second chances has reached and hear your thoughts about their story. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 for more tales of love, adventure, and redemption from the American frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover these heartwarming stories. Until next time, partners.